some are producers and writers, some are just songwriters, but these are people that go in a room every day, and between noon and 6 p.m., they're really working hard to come up with a great lyric concept, a great melody, a great track if you're a producer writer. And they are still in the quantity game, right? Which is that you have to write songs all year to find one song that's going to change your year. You got to write songs all decade to find one that's going to change your life. So, the best of them are trial and error guys. But if you really get to see, just some of the great songwriters, I mean, we have some amazing writers, and you get to see what they do, and you hear some of the songs they turn in. Some of these people are truly gifted storytellers.
What's going on? Welcome to The New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book. Third edition is out now. All formats, ebook, audiobook, hardcover, however you like books, you can find the book. Today, my guest is Lucas Keller. He is the founder and president of Milk and Honey. It's a music and sports entertainment company, management company. They represent a lot of songwriters, artists, and now athletes. But we talked about the songwriting and producer side of the business. They represent producers as well. We kind of went into the weeds of how the business of songwriting works today. Now, Milk and Honey represents songwriters and producers behind some of the biggest hits of the century, including Dua Lipa's Levitating, BTS's Butter, Justin Bieber's Despacito, James Arthur's Say You Won't Let Go, Christina Perri's 1,000 Years, and many, many more. Other hits including David Guetta and Doja Cat, Travis Scott, Morgan Wallen, just to name very few. You can check out their roster on their website, Milk and Honey, and see all the songwriters, artists, and producers that they do represent. But yeah, so today we talk about where the songwriting industry is at right now, some of the ethics behind how the royalties work, how points work. And I do want to kind of set the stage a little bit because we get into the weeds and we throw a lot of terms around, and just so you understand this conversation, getting into it, if you're not already an expert on publishing and songwriting and all the terms around all of this, there's a big distinction between what is known as an artist in the music industry and what is known as a songwriter. And so Lucas and I are very intentional when we're discussing artist and songwriter and producer, I guess, while we're at it. So there's three very distinct categories of these creatives in the music industry. So you don't want to confuse what an artist is. And an artist is someone who records the music, usually the singer or the band. That is the name when you're hitting play. What is the name right there? That's the artist. Now, the songwriter is the person that wrote the song behind the scenes. Usually when you hit credits, you can see who the songwriters are, the composers. Songwriters and composers are used interchangeably. And then producers are the ones that produce the track. They're the ones that help create the recording. So really think about that as we go through this, because it will be wildly confusing if you're like, well, you just talked about songwriters and now you're saying artists and they're the same person, aren't they? Well, no, we actually separate them. So when we talk about songwriters, we're actually just meaning the people that wrote the songs. When we're talking about artists, we're really just meaning those that sign record deals or release music under their name. They're very, very different. And same goes for sound recordings and masters. Those royalties are just on the label and artist side. And same goes with publishing royalties, and that's on the songwriter side. So I want to clear that up from the get-go so you have an understanding of what we're talking about through this, because we do get into the weeds. But if you understand the publishing industry, this is going to be very fascinating for you. Because, yeah, we talk about the ethics. We talk about how publishing deals are working these days, how they've changed and evolved throughout the years. We talk about record deals. We talk about catalog sales. Lucas and Milk and Honey have been behind many, many catalog sales for many, many millions of dollars. And we get into how they set up these hit songwriting sessions. It was a very fascinating interview, and I think you're going to learn a lot when you get to this. So you can find Milk and Honey on Instagram or on their website and check out their full roster there. We'll link to it. You can find Lucas Keller on all of the socials and LinkedIn and all of that. You can find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Twitter, all of that, X, all the things. But right now, if you just visit aristake.com and get on the email list, that's where you're going to get the most up-to-date information about the new music business, and we will let you know when the new episodes come out. You can find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram. But if you could just pause this right now and hit the subscribe, hit the follow button, give us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or however you're listening to this, give us a thumbs up on YouTube. That would be super helpful. All right, let's kick into the show. Lucas Keller, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here. How you doing?
Yeah, so you're catching me. I'm all like ramped up right now because I went to the Sona Warrior Awards last night here in LA. Yeah. The event honoring songwriters and songwriter advocacy organization, and got super inspired by all these initiatives that songwriters are, especially the advocates in the space, are looking to work towards to make songwriters pay better, songwriters' lives better, all of that. And you're kind of the front lines of a lot of that. So I'm excited to kind of dig into all of that. But before we do, I want to just like set the stage. If you could just give people kind of a little background on yourself, but really Milk and Honey, and kind of how you built this company and what you do overall, but more specific, I want to kind of keep this towards the songwriter space today. So through that lens of like what you've been doing with songwriters over the last 10 years and so.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'm 22 years in the music business, started out the first 12 managing rock bands, spent a lot of time on the road, managed a good amount of artists that a lot of people would know, and pivoted into representing songwriters about a decade ago. So we started Milk and Honey from pretty humble beginnings. I started the company with one client. There's a guy named David Hodges, who I still represent. And, one turned into 5 or 6 of them, and it's turned into about 80 of them. So between LA and New York and Nashville and London, Milk and Honey represents about 80 frontline producers and writers amongst artists and athletes and other people as well. 10 years ago, I mean, producer management has probably been around since the mid 70s. 10 years ago, a lot of my artist manager friends kind of laughed at me and said, there's no money in managing producers and writers. So started from that point, but we manage a whole lot of them and have turned a lot of them into big businesses and big brands. And we're out there, advocating for people that, don't have much of a voice, and, kind of people want songwriters hit records, but there's not a lot of respect for the writers. And so we worked really hard to, create brands for a lot of them and to create respect for them in the community.
That's great. And you're right. I mean, songwriters are the, no pun intended, the unsung heroes of the music industry. I mean, they are the ones that there would be no music industry without the songs. And most hit songs these days have behind the scenes songwriters, and most people don't know their names. But, I think getting to the point of where you said a lot of people laughed at you saying there's no money in managing songwriters and producers, I think there's where that sentiment is coming from is songwriters make so much less the way that the royalty system is structured right now than artists do, at least in terms of like the amount of money that is paid out in royalties for the sound recording, which is paid out to the artists and the labels, of course, versus the publishing, versus the composition, which is paid out to the publishers and the songwriters. There's a massive discrepancy when it comes to streams these days. So talk to me about I think that the traditional thinking, it was with songwriters, you need to hit on the radio because all the money comes in performance royalties when your song plays on the radio, and everything else, it doesn't really count. Talk to me about kind of the financial implications of where we are at as an industry right now for songwriters. Let's start there, and then we can get into producers later. But that's a little different case because they have some participation in sound recording. But just on the songwriters front.
Well, and another thing I'd say is, my friends were doing big Live Nation deals before the pandemic. We were doing big publishing catalog sales over the pandemic, right? So it kind of, in the end, I think we realized that representing songwriters and copyrights is a very large business. But I think, people look at kind of the spokes on the wheel for an artist, and they look at touring and merchandising and, and fan club and all these kind of
Mm,
different things. Look at your masters and publishing. And, there's so many spokes on the wheel for an artist to make money that this is a big real or a big reason why you don't see enough big artists coming out to speak out on behalf of their songwriter friends.
yeah,
Nobody wants to disrupt their relationship with Spotify or have issue getting on playlists. Nobody wants to turn against their major record company. And so, what we need is we need a big voice in the artist community to go to bat for the songwriters, but you still kind of don't see it for that reason. Because again,
right.
publishing and songwriting is just a small spoke on the wheel for artists, but it's
Hmm.
everything for the American songwriter. Look, unfortunately, streaming has had a negative effect on songwriters. You see certain companies, have added master recordings just to their business. You look at BMG, for example, they as soon as they saw that streaming, paid out so much on masters, they just started building up their label division. I mean, it makes total sense to me.
Yeah,
But we've had a real focus on writers, and we didn't really want to get away from that. So, if you look at it, I mean, 3-4 to 1, or something on masters to publishing on streaming,
right.
and
Yep.
when I started this company, I mean, even just 10 years ago when we would have a number one hit on FM radio, you look at like the media based radio charts, that really mattered. And, unfortunately, you can look every year at that audience on it. You can look at number one spot on media base. That audience is getting smaller. So, what the number one spot at FM radio, the amount of people that it reaches on a daily or weekly basis is getting smaller. And part of that is you have FM radio coming off the dash. You have people that are streaming. And I think we can look into the future and say that at some point, FM radio will be completely gone. And
Sure.
so it's kind of, it's probably like I talked to a lot of people about it. It must be like when people stopped buying magazines and print started to fall apart, and guys are out there selling like banner ads on their website. Like it just, the chasm between ad revenue at that time is, I mean, you saw companies really downsize. That's going to happen right now for songwriters. And, one of the issues
Right.
we have there is, you songwriters are not, they have enough against them. They're not helping themselves by, and some of this is driven by the A&R community that does this in passing records around. But, they're not helping themselves in the sense that like the songs now have 10 songwriters on them or 15 songwriters. I know you said, well, we'll get into producers later, but even to that end, I'm seeing songs with 5, 6 producers on them.
Yeah.
So as a company, Milk and Honey is really pushing back on that because if that becomes a standard, writing songs will just be like just be a hobby. You'll have a day
Yeah.
job, and writing songs will be a starving arts. So.
Well, let's talk about that, the number of songwriters on a track, because yeah, the majority of the pop songs, I mean, it's comical at sometimes of how many people's names are listed there. I mean, two things to that point. Who decides how many songwriters are going to be on a song?
Yeah, I mean, some of that is really there's just some bad actors in the A&R space that will take a
Yeah.
song that had 3 people on them and on the song, and they'll send it around maybe to a couple other producers that are also writers, and the producers sometimes get publishing. Maybe they'll
Yeah.
send it by a couple more writers that are signed to their publishing company they own. It just kind of gets passed around, and I think like an A&R person would tell you like there's an artistic reason to call another producer. It's like there's certain producers that have a certain aesthetic. And I think there's a way you can do that and make the business work. And I think we're all for that. It's just when it becomes like, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 extra people added to a song, where it's like you might have had 33% of a song, and that in the number one position might have made a real
Yeah.
difference. But now you have, 4 or 5%. So I mean,
Yeah.
the number for us that we say it just isn't worth it is when you're below that's 17.5% on a song. 15, 17.5% on a song, not that interesting. You want to be at 20% or above when it comes to the publishing. So some of this is the
So
A&R people that are doing
yeah.
it. Some of it is the writers.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still having big songs written that are 50-50 songs, and this is math. Like if you could just take a guy that has 12.5% on a song, 4x at 50%, 4 times the money. It's that simple.
Right. All right. Well, all right. So let's talk about producers. like you said, the songs might get passed around to some producers because A&R thinks they can help the sound. The challenge is, and this is what a lot of people at the Sono Awards last night were talking about, and Ross Golan gave a very fiery speech on this topic. Ray, the artist Ray, from England, she's now independent. She was talking about this. She was honored last night. The fact that producers and artists, and we're going to get to the artist thing in a second, but let's just say in general, people are participating in publishing who had no hand in writing the actual composition. Producers being one, they might help the sound, like you said, but that has nothing. That is not.
Sorry, I was saying someone told me he was giving the speech about people stealing catalog. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, and there, yes, he referenced saying if you sell your catalog for $200 million and you're an artist and you had, publishing, like that is theft, that is stealing, because if you actually didn't have a hand in writing the song, you're stealing from the songwriters. And like, some of the biggest superstars in the world do this. We know this. It's a common practice, and I'd love for you to speak to it as to why, as the manager of songwriters, or if you accept this practice or the pressures that you might get from the labels or the managers or whatever it may be, why this practice exists when superstar artists and producers get to participate in publishing when they had no hand in actually writing the composition.
Yeah, so this goes back to Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, who was the first Colonel, one that started this. He's like, son, you want Elvis to sing that record, you're going to have to give him some publishing. So people blame a lot of modern
Dolly Parton turned it down, and it turned out okay for her.
It totally turned out okay for her. I think, modern artist managers are just carrying on that tradition, but he kind of ruined it for everyone. I've talked to very successful songwriters who I've confronted them about that, and they say, I don't know, I forfeit 10% of the publishing I had. I still have 20 or 30% of the song. That's worth something to me, and I don't feel great about it, but it's like that versus not having this artist, major artist cut a song. And, everybody kind of participates in the race to the bottom. And it's because very seldomly do you have songwriters that are willing to put their foot down and say, I'm willing to walk from this. I like my old guys, because my old guys that have made money, I got guys that put their foot down at the biggest artists in the world if they're being disrespected. And then we get to have a lot of fun with those guys. It's the young ones that say, well, gee, I didn't want to take this haircut, but I need this first hit, or I need this moment. And so, again, everybody's kind of complicit in this kind of race to the bottom. A lot of people don't think about
But isn't it up to you as their manager to guide them and consult them on that?
Yeah, they listen sometimes. So, I think a lot of it, comes down to like, just kind of what the circumstance is. And sometimes when they're taking that haircut, they still are getting a reasonable enough piece of the record. But, many songwriters have tried to create movements around this. There's been a few kind of independent movements where writers, have kind of said, okay, artists are not going to be allowed to take publishing from us. But the truth is, you're always, in lieu of a union, which songwriters can't unionize, in lieu of a union, you're always going to have people that stray from the pack. And people say, okay, well, I'll work, I'll take that deal. And so again, it's like, because one person will undercut another person, or someone will quietly do one of these deals, the songwriter kind of group continues to be fragmented.
So the other thing that was kind of has been discussed in the songwriter community, and there was a lot of noise about this last night, is going the other way. Artists and record labels cutting in songwriters into points on the master. Now, that historically, of course, was never done. Now, Ross made a great point last night saying, everybody likes to say there's no precedent for this, but there was no precedent to cut in producers to points until Phil Spector in the 60s. There was no precedent in cutting in mixing engineers until the 80s on the Michael Jackson records. Now, there is some indie labels are starting to cut in songwriters. Famously, Justin Tranter's label that he started, that is a big mission of their label, is to offer points on the master, on the sound recordings, to the songwriters. What have you been hearing about this, and kind of what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Justin, just saw him this morning. Lovely guy and great cause to start a label and to be able to be giving points. And it works great if and hopefully this happens for him. It works great if he breaks an artist or two and then creates some type of precedent. The problem is, if you look at like this, I don't know what it was last quarter, $3.25 billion the Universal Music Group did, in revenue last quarter. It's like, it's a company that's built on 82 points, right? Throughout 70 years of recorded history, they've been giving artists 18-point royalty deals. Obviously, some of those have changed, or they change if you have more leverage. But what's happening is you have a movement where people are asking for more royalty points, and the labels are really holding back on precedent, to do that. They don't want to give any extra points. Sure. To writers, producers, whatever. And the producer royalties customarily they come from the artist royalties. So if an artist only has 18 to 20 points, when you call and ask for 5 points instead of 4 points for a producer, you actually hear from the artist manager, not the label. So there's a lot that's happening. I think at the beginning of the writers getting points movement, it was kind of, the narrative was off. It was like, let's take this from the producers. I think since the producers spent a lot of time producing and finishing songs, they didn't feel like they should share that with the writers.
Sure.
I think it kind of felt like 360 deals felt, where it was like, well, why am I giving this money away? You guys aren't doing anything for it. But I think now the narrative is that we take those fees as writer fees, and they're points that come on top of the producer royalty. Our expectation is that the label will pay for those points. Not necessarily the artist, because the artist doesn't have enough to go around. And I will tell you that we do get those deals done once in a while, but God, they're dramatic, and it's a lot of work, and they don't want to admit that they do them. They don't do them, and we have to go as far as to pull songs down. We have to do all kinds of crazy stuff to make sure our clients get paid on those. But generally, I don't see that changing very soon. Okay. But what I do see is that I think less artists are going to sign major label deals. And I also think that we live in a world where less artists are going to sign major label deals. And I think that we do live in a world where, when an artist signs a deal to, say, The Orchard or AWOL or one of these, label services companies, they're getting the reciprocal royalty to what they get at a major label. So they're getting paid, so sometimes they're owning 70, 80%. They're paying 20 or 30%. We're going to expect that with those releases, the producers get a flex up on their royalties. So my argument is, if an artist had a 40 or had a 20% royalty in the past, and now they own 80% of their masters, instead of 4 points, I'm going to ask for 16. So at least, so there's a lot of changes where it's like, it's going to get better for producers. The things that are get better for writers. Those are some of the conversations, but I don't see the labels, the majors, soon giving in on writer fees as a standard.
Yeah, but like you said, as a lot more artists stay independent or go with label services company where they're making the lion's share, where they're making 70, 80%, there are more points to play with. And for producers, absolutely. And I think that's totally fair that producers should make that equivalent. If they're, typically making 4 points on a major label deal, then whatever that percentage is, 4 divided by, 18 is what they would make on an indie deal. And you cut that into the percentage, that math makes complete sense to me. But now there's more points to work with. Maybe the artist could take a few of those and pass them to songwriters. We'll see. I want to get into a little bit of kind of how, just into the weeds a little bit of just the business of, well, not necessarily the business, but I guess the process of songwriting, of hit songwriting, of how songwriting works. Because I think a lot of people listening don't quite understand what like how a song is really made on kind of a mainstream way, like going for, swinging for the rafters, trying to make a hit song. Like, step me through this process of just like how a hit song is made.
Right. Yeah. This part will be much more exciting to them than the master and publishing royalty points.
You'd be surprised that we have a very smart audience here, and they're pretty nerdy when it comes to the business. So, but they're going to be excited about both sides. But yeah, hit me with this.
Like every year, hundreds or thousands of songwriters come to Hollywood or Nashville to try to make it in the business, and most of them
Yep.
don't make it. The list of, like if you look at Nashville, for example, I forget what the numbers are, but the list of like working songwriters now that are successful is so much shorter than it used to be. I think it's a business now where it's like, one, it's going to be harder to have a hit because there's just so much music and content. You have the kind of,
Sure.
If you look at 25 years of kind of lowering the barrier of entry on technology, hit songs are made in bedrooms. It's just such a, I really think where we're headed with the business, and a lot of the apps and things that are coming out, like music has always been for everyone, but music creation is not. It's been for pros. Music creation, I think in the future will be for everyone. And that's going to make it really difficult for the working songwriter. And so I think,
Sure.
because it used to be difficult, right? Like there's this great video from the 90s of Tupac yelling at his like crew of guys in the studio saying that they're kind of messing around and wasting time. And he's like, the record company pays good money for the studio, and we have a limited amount of time to make these records in the studio. Like that is not the world we live in anymore, right? Like, you
Right.
make records in with very little equipment. And so I think now, what we have to look at is like, who are the people that are truly invested in the craft of writing songs, and then what artists, will still write with those people. We're even seeing a more artist-driven world, and then also people that kind of write with the people they started with, and they stick with them for a long time. So that kind of business of you come to Hollywood, you've had a hit song on accident, and you don't totally know why, and now you're going to get in with kind of the circle of pop writers. I think that list of people is going to get smaller because a lot of them aren't going to be able to make a living. But if the ones that do, to kind of to actually answer your question, that list of people is really protected, just by the people that are great. Some are producers and writers, some are just songwriters, but these are people that go in a room every day, and between noon and 6 p.m., they're really working hard to come up with a great lyric concept, a great melody, a great track if you're a producer writer. They are still in the quantity game, right? Which is that you have to write songs all year to find one song that's going to change your year. You got to write songs all decade to find one that's going to change your life. So, the best of them are trial and error guys. But if you really get to see, just some of the great songwriters, we have some amazing writers, and you get to see what they do, and you hear some of the songs they turn in. Like some of these people are truly gifted storytellers and writers, and the best of them will tell you that they don't write 100% songs. They'll write it. They only write in rooms with 2, 3, 4, 5 people. So I think that process of collaboration, is such a key part and key ingredient in getting a great song. And I also think like understanding how to stage those rooms. That's a big part of what my company does is like, we're probably 16 creatives, probably a bigger creative staff than most publishers on that tip. And, we're really like, it's a lot of my guys are kind of, they're taste making in the sense that you're kind of pulling out the box of 64 crayons and you're figuring out like what colors go well with each other. Like it's that staging a room and saying like, I think this could be interesting. And that could be like Unlikely Friends, right? Or like The Odd Couple. It could be finding people that say, well, I don't know what this would be, but let's try this. Like that taste making and curation thing, I think is still really important. I don't think it'll exist at the record companies much going forward, that I think become more like acquisition and marketing companies. but I think
Sure.
publishers and managers still do a lot of it.
Well, that's interesting when you talk about staging the rooms, right? Because I always thought that was the publisher's job, and I know it probably still is. But I'm curious, like, what as the manager of a lot of these songwriters and producers, are you putting your own writer producers in rooms? Are you working with publishing companies to kind of pair up your songwriters and producers with theirs? Are you working with labels to get artists in the rooms with your writers and producers? Like, tell me about this process of just like how you stage those rooms.
Yeah, so a lot that's really, kind of known by most people as a publisher's job. This is really what people know as music publishing. Unfortunately,
Right.
what happened is the publishers got so in the business of signing so many people, and they're really spread out that it's like every one
Yeah.
creative person has like 100 or 200 writers on their desk, and so there's a lot of really great people at the publishers. They just can't, you know, they're not honest about what the delivery is going to be, and so
Yeah.
there's this flawed situation I've been saying for a long time with the publishers where they they don't manage expectations. So they go in, sell songwriters kind of on the, sorry to be cynical, but they sell songwriters on the dream of being in their life a lot. I'm going to do this and that. And I think if you went to a publishing meeting and said, we're going to write you $1 million check, I'm going to check in with you once a month or every 2 months. I'm going to give you a few great ideas or collaborations a year and pitch some of your songs. I'll make sure the sync department is doing what they're supposed to do. And then when you're done with your deal, hopefully we sign another one if you perform. If they said that, nobody would sign with them, but they'd be being honest. And so people would like feel good about it. And then you wouldn't have a bunch of songwriters saying, oh, I hate my publisher. So the problem is the model is flawed because there's too much quantity. And I think in a
Mm,
world where you're going to have an absolute ton of songwriters that only ever have one hit, um, you're just going to be in the business of publishers signing songs, signing writers on calculated advances, and it's going to be much harder to make these kind of perennial hit makers. But in a management company, we just do it in less quantity, so we get to really drill down with people. And so I always tell people like we have to be great managers, we have to do great deals for people, but we also and organize them and be really detailed and all that. But also like we have to be what they had hoped they'd get from their publishing company. So,
hmm
we're doing all of that creative. And, in terms of putting those rooms together, it's just like having creatives that really know the whole list of songwriters. It's like having people that understand what each person does, like having relationships so they can get sought after people in the room. I still think a big part of my job, I'm not as in the trenches setting up sessions every day as our team is, but like a
Sure.
big part of my job is like introductions. It's like I'm constantly making introductions all day, many of which, go on to be really, really important introductions. And, another part of my job is really like pushing people to try something, I can think of multiple artists I've set up with our writers and producers in the last decade that went on to be great long partnerships. And the
Mm,
guy I called just didn't want to set it up. So I had to like lean into the relationship and and sell them on. I think the best of what we do is like as I'm kind of a collector of many things. So as a collector, like I look at our roster and I feel like I understand what each and our clients know this about me. Like I really truly understand what each of them does best and why they're important. And so I think when you're
mm,
selling people on them, I mean, this is really management is a sales job now, right? So it's like convincing people and selling people on something. And so
sure.
I think we really understand how to do that, and through that, we're able to kind of take what would have been a lot of no's and turn them into yeses and make a lot of
Cool.
powerful introductions.
Amazing. Let's talk publishing deals. What kinds of deals? I mean, you threw out I mean, just a number a couple of minutes ago of just like if they're going to give $1 million deal and tell the truth, no one would sign it. But what are the deals actually looking like these days in terms of? I mean, how does a publishing deal work? I guess just from the most basic form of what a publishing deal is to kind of what you're seeing these days and like is there an advance, what you're seeing, what is the expectation, what's the term? Yeah, just break down kind of the bullet points for what publishing deals look like these days.
Sure. So publishing deals. used to be very large because somebody would write a full album, and people would have
Yeah.
20, 30, 50, 100% of songs. The classic songwriters, tons of artists, especially in Nashville, that would cut a song from a songwriter and they wouldn't take publishing. So the
Mm.
publishing deals used to be very, very large, millions of dollars. And as we got into a generation of singles during iTunes, and especially during streaming, where the major labels really set songwriters back decades, like by negotiating deals where there's an inequitable payout to the publishers and the songwriters. And the worst part about it is that the major publishers are owned by the major labels. Like, this would not be allowed in any other business. But these people,
Right.
the presidents of the major publishing companies are really good people. I mean, there's great people that had really come up in the business and had big wins and hits and storied executives. But, they can't go against their bosses that run the major record companies. But if they were really advocating for songwriters, they would say this payout in streaming is not fair and it's inequitable, and songwriting is going to be a hobby in the future. It's just not sustainable with the amount of people writing and the amount of releases. What is it, like 90,000 releases a day on Spotify now or whatever? Like, with the amount of releases and the inequitable payout when you do have a billion streaming record, if you see the publishing on a billion streaming record, I mean, it's nothing to write home about. So, I think that's an unfortunate reality, is that the publishers can't truly advocate for their songwriters. But one of the things I'm seeing as much as the Music Modernization Act and the CRB and things like this, like, really help songwriters, I'm finally seeing a correction where, I feel like I shouldn't feed this narrative because it's not great for my company. But, like, if I'm being honest with you, which I'm going to be, the advances are coming down on publishing. The publishing companies are not keeping as many people around. They want to overinvest in their A-list people and they want to underinvest in everyone else. There's kind of this great middle class for a long time. These publishing deals are going to get incredibly cheap because what they finally realized is, with all the cutbacks at the majors, the publishing companies are in the scope, and they're realizing, like, we got to operate more lean and mean. And you're seeing it.
Yeah.
They have to they have to be tighter on the and have better margins. So I think that's the thing, is, like, publishing deals are coming down. And, you still have sync and you have broadcast and you have streaming and you have, digital and multiple opportunities to monetize publishing. And certainly, like, I always hate when people are cynical about, like, it's a horrible time for music. It's the best time for music. There's so much music. There's so many options at the buffet, but there's just almost too much. Like, if you look at when I started my career in 2002, there just were a lot less artists. So it makes it hard. It's hard for my clients. They don't know where to focus. We have to be the ones to kind of put the horse blinders on and tell them what to focus on. But yeah, so it's been harder to make money from a publishing perspective. The good news is, if you build a real catalog, that's always going to have a great exit. I think one thing that songwriters, a couple things in their favor still, are that you get to earn off a catalog your whole career. And then at the end of your career, you get to sell your catalog on a multiple. So you get this great liquidity event at the end of your career, which is fantastic. And, we are still in the business of clients that own intellectual property. I don't take that for granted, that, like, someday that may not be the business. If you were going to write a theme for a show now, it'd be work for hire. But I read something somewhere that, like, Danny Elfman gets paid like 17 grand a day on, like, the Simpsons theme or something. Like, what an amazing moment in time. But, like, who's to say writing songs in the future won't be a work for hire business? If all the vendors, if all the labels make it that way, that'll be the only option. So songwriters not being able to negotiate in the free market is a problem. I think that'll change in the future. But the nice part is, like, they say songwriters make money in their sleep. You go to sleep, your songs play around the world, and you wake up. So provided we can get a better royalty rate and increase the payout for songwriters, the opportunity of owning intellectual property is still great for writers.
So I want to get a little bit more into the weeds, and that's super helpful to frame all of this. Help us understand what it looks like specifically when in terms of, like, okay, there's an advance, and you can give me a ballpark. And then how does it work? Like you're talking about, the major record labels keep 82 points. That's traditionally what's happening. What do publishers keep? How is that paid out? Major record labels operate traditionally on album cycles. I don't think that's how it works for publishing. Break it down for me, like, if someone just doesn't really understand what a publishing deal even means.
Sure. So 82 points would be on the master recording, right? On the
And
publishing
that's for
side,
labels. Yeah.
yeah. So, publishing on a sale used to be a mechanical royalty, right? Mechanical royalty
Mm-hmm.
is a reference that goes back to the era of player pianos, right? So,
Sure.
very old reference. And, mechanicals don't exist in the same way in a streaming world. But, the idea is that, for every stream, there's a portion that goes to the publisher and there's a portion that goes to the record company. And I'd say it's like,
Right.
3.5 to 1, is the master to what the publisher is.
Sure.
Gets paid. And on that, you are, a lot of people have a co-publishing deal, so they're giving away half their publishing company to Sony, or they're publishing to Sony, Warner, Universal, and then on top of that, you have, you're obviously giving away part of your publishing there, but then you have how many times the song is cut up, right? So you're chopping up that number that you're getting. And remember, like, just to give an example, like 1 million streams is like almost $4,700. So you have to get 1 million streams to make that much before it's chopped up, kind of 4 ways, right? And so now do that math by 1 billion streams. 1 billion streams are like the biggest hits ever, right? Like I think our company's had 30 billion streamers in 10 years, and that's a huge success rate. So to get 1 billion streams and see how much the label makes and how little the publisher makes, but also to realize like nobody made that much money. Especially on new music, right? In a world where like new music is not indexing, right? Like catalog is really making a lot of the money, which hence why a lot of the labels are sizing
Right.
down. But on publishing, somebody's getting paid when it's licensed in TV or film or an advertisement, which is considered a sync. Somebody's getting paid on a mechanical royalty for a sale. So every unit has a sale. They're getting paid on the publishing, per stream.
Yep.
And then on broadcast, through societies like ASCAP, BMI, GMR, CSAC, AMRA, et cetera, companies that that collect on airplay, which are great companies, and lots of change in that space right now. But I think a lot of those companies are really just trying to hold on to what they had the last 75 years because there's great change in that space.
So when it comes to just as like an example, if I'm understanding this right, I'm a publishing company. You're a songwriter. I'm signing you, and I'm like gonna give you an advance up front. Let's say use the example of $1 million. So I'm gonna give you $1 million, and then I'm gonna all the money that comes in for the publishing of all the songs that you're turning in. I'm gonna keep all that money until you recoup that million, kind of like a record deal. Or you said co-pub. Does that mean half the money? What does a co-pub deal mean?
So what it means is they're going to collect all of that money on the advance, right? They're going to give you $1 million. They're going to recoup your $1 million before you get a payout on the royalty.
Okay.
So, it just depends on what your relationship with your publisher is. Like, to me, that's some of these can appear as like bad loans, because it's like, okay, if you, very quietly, companies like ASCAP and BMI have been giving out advances for a long time. That's an interest-free advance. All you have to do is commit to stay with them for an extra couple of years. And, if you're happy at one, you're probably not going to the other. They're all great companies. But, in the publishing world, you're trading half of your publisher's share for a certain advance on certain dollar figures. So if I told you, hey, do you want $1 million on a 25% interest rate? What would you say to me, right? So these are kind of the deals that have been going on in the music business, and the smart songwriters stop taking the money. Eventually, they say, I have enough money, and I want to be, it's kind of like there's just a group of people that are like, oh, I want to make money off the fruits of my labor, and and I'll have somebody collect on my songs, but like I don't want to just keep taking bank loans, right? Which is what the publishing deals are. So you go and you call one of these companies like Cobalt or Downtown, and the majors do them too, but you get something called an admin deal, which is a lower split. Where you say, okay, well maybe I'll take $1 million for an 8% interest rate. So but songwriters still don't look at this as interest. They don't look at it the same way, and they should, right? It's just that they're giving
Hmm.
away too much. So, most people have a co-publishing deal earlier in their career and then an admin deal later. And just to crystallize the difference, a co-publishing deal is like a same thing as an admin deal. It's just a higher percentage.
Gotcha. And are they required? What are these? What are the terms typically looking like? How many songs is a songwriter expected to turn in before the deal finishes?
Yeah, so it could be a few different things. I mean, sometimes, like in Nashville, they'll just say 3 years flat, and then you're out,
Okay.
and you turn into songs for 3 years.
Hmm.
Also in Nashville, they customarily took full publishing deals, which didn't hasn't lasted that long. That hasn't aged very well because I think people are realizing that co-publishing deals and admin deals existed. But the nice thing
Mm.
about Nashville deals was that you'd have kind of a hard out after 3 or 4 years. The rest of the world famously did something called an MDRC, which was a minimum delivery and release commitment, which basically said, say you have a 3 or 4, say you have a 4-year publishing deal, that's 4 terms. They call it 1+3. So you have 4 separate years in your publishing deal. And then say, okay, I'm going to give you 250, I'm going to give you $1 million. So I'm going to give you 250 each of 4 years, right? So you get
Okay.
250 grand a year. You have to recoup that 250 grand. Otherwise, the term just keeps extending. But what happens is in that period, so this is a two-way business affair as gets people, right, at the publishers. So this is a recoupment deal I'm talking about. You have to recoup your $250,000 before you get to go to the next year's term. So 1 year can actually extend into 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And so what happens during that time is the songwriter's writing songs, trying to recoup that deal, but they're putting more songs into the deal. So in that case, a publisher could get an extra 100, 150 songs, just because the writer isn't recouped. Just because they weren't successful doesn't mean they won't later be successful. So that's the first way they
Right.
get you. The second way they get you with these MDRCs I'm telling you about is like they would say you need to have three 100% major label songs. Or they'd say three 100% major label songs that sell more than 1 million copies. So you
Mm.
add up percentages. So if you have 4 songs, separate songs that you had 25% on, you now have one 100% song. And
Mm.
so all of a sudden, three
Gotcha.
100% songs, since pop writers don't get 100% usually, is like a lot of songs.
Yeah.
That could be like 14 songs, right? And so that would hold a lot of people into deals too. So I think I will say this, jumping ahead, like it's an unforgiving world for like music companies that don't want to be transparent. If that's not part of your business model, it's
Yeah.
it's not a good great world to be in. I think artists and their managers and songwriters, like all these people, are taking back the power, and I think it's an important time for companies to be really transparent and to cut fair deals.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the not artist friendly deals, I think, go out with the last decade.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've referenced a couple times, catalog sales and how songwriters can sell their catalogs. And I know you've been involved in quite a few catalog sales. And we had Sam Hollander on the show
Yeah.
shortly after he sold his catalog for many millions. And that it's become very big business. When did you kind of get into that, and where do you see this heading now?
I'm a youngin, so I'm 40. So before the pandemic, I hadn't sold a catalog in my life,
Sure.
and the pandemic happened. I think they call it like survivor's remorse or survivor's guilt or something. Like I spent the whole pandemic. We had the sharpest, raise in income on our company that we'd ever had, and I spent the whole pandemic just like becoming an amateur finance guy because a friend of mine said he's like, your clients are all going to sell their catalogs, and you're going to get cut out by lawyers and brokers from catalogs and all these clients that you had these hits, but like some investment banker is going to show up and eat your lunch. So uh, like I hadn't since college. I kind of went back to the library till 4 a.m. for a couple nights, and really like learned these transactions, met everyone in the space, I think we shop to 160 buyers globally, in that world, between private equity, hedge funds, family offices, foreign wealth, pension funds, et cetera, and really, really understand how to value, package, sell this stuff. And we still do it quite a lot. It's a big part of our business. But, it's funny because unlike the people that do it full time, we take it really seriously, but I'm not as aggressive as other people because it's kind of my side hustle. Like my job is representing songwriters and artists and football
Sure.
and baseball players, and not necessarily like out transacting on catalogs, but it's an important part of the business. And I also think I take it more seriously than other people because for a lot of these people, I'm going to know them their whole career, and like if I can find someone an extra $4 or $5 million, that's life changing for them. And so,
Yeah.
we were kind of like kings in the kind of $2 to $40 million range selling catalogs. And in that range, that's your American, pop writer. That's the guy that's had, 5 or 6 big hits. And, you're going out there and doing a transaction. It'll be the biggest transaction of their life. So we take it really, really seriously. And, those would trade for 10 to 20 time multiples, depending on where the interest rates are at and where the finance world is at. But we've done a lot of great deals for people, and it's a great business to be in.
Amazing. Well, Lucas, thank you so much for joining us. And time just flew by. And we really got touched a lot of different topics. And I appreciate your transparency with all of this and all the work that you're doing on behalf of songwriters and continue to do. We didn't get to the sports side of your business, but I know that that's growing. And did you hit the Packers game? I should say the Rams, but Packers game yesterday? Because I know you're from Wisconsin.
I watched it, and I'm a diehard Packers fan. So
I grew up in Wisconsin too. I don't think we. Yeah.
I tell people I'm a fan of whoever I have, winning that day, or whatever team they're on.
Of course. Well, very cool. Right. Well, I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
Oh man, I think I'm like remaking it every couple of years. Like I really think, I don't know, this is 22 years. I like quit my heavy metal band and like decided to be a manager, and it's gone. I always tell people, like, I came from Wisconsin. I had no connection to the business. So I've already won. Whatever happens from here is extra. But I think for me, like, there's just, at 40, there's so many worlds left to be won ahead of us, and more worlds. And I think it's an exciting time. I think it's a really crucial time to diversify our businesses because of pandemics, disruptive technologies, all kinds of things. Like Milk and Honey will continue to expand into other verticals and won't just be the kind of songwriter guys for that reason. Yeah. And I think we were able to realize we were able to bring our talents to other spaces. So, but yeah, still having fun, and still getting tattoos because I've convinced my family that I'm not getting a real job anytime soon.
That's great. Right on. Well, Lucas, thanks so much. That was great.
Yeah, Ari, thanks again. This was great.
Today's episode was edited by Ari Davids with music by Grassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.